Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for Thursday, June 11th, 2026. And today we are going to take a deep dive into this year's hurricane season in the Atlantic. We're going to talk about what exactly is going to happen this year. You've been hearing all the talks, of course, online about the fact that we're going to get an El Nino, and that should lead to a less active hurricane season this year, probably the least active hurricane season since at least 2015. But there's a catch to it, and I'll go over what that catch is later on, but I'm going to go over what exactly is going to happen this year. Will those less active hurricane season forecasts verify? Is it looking like it's going to verify? We're going to take a look at all of the current conditions, including El Nino, and there's an update on El Nino today to talk about. And of course, we're going to go over all of the model data as well. So this is going to be a long length video, deep dive. So if you're interested in that, please fasten your seatbelts and let's get going. Starting off with how hurricane activity typically plays out in a hurricane season. We start off here at the beginning of June, and if you're an avid tropical tracker, I'm pretty sure you have more than likely seen this graph before. We start off at the beginning of June here, not a lot of tropical activity, but then we slowly ramp up as we get through July and into August, and then as we get into late August, we see the huge ramp-up curve here up until the peak of the hurricane season, which is on September 10th. Now, this year is more than likely going to be a less active season, and again, we will go over why throughout the course of this video, but regardless, we are still at the very beginning of hurricane season, so even if there's nothing happening now, there is more than likely something going to happen eventually down the line. All right, now on to everything that we're looking at right now in terms of hurricane season conditions. First of all, taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern, although really, if I'll be honest with you, more or less the entire video is kind of going to be based on this map here, but we're going to go over and go a little bit into depth on certain details about certain things. First off, the biggest factor for this hurricane season, El Nino. We have a very strong El Nino building here in the Pacific, and the Climate Prediction Center from NOAA officially today has declared that we are now in an official El Nino by NOAA standards. So El Nino is here, and it is going to ramp up, and as I'll show you with the climate models here in a little bit, this is really going to ramp up into a very, very strong El Nino this season. And on the other hand, we have a somewhat warm, near normal, some areas slightly below normal Atlantic. The Atlantic is not overwhelmingly warm. It's not overwhelmingly cold, although if you look at some other sea surface temperature maps, it may seem that way, but overall the Atlantic is kind of near normal to slightly above normal. I'd say in a regular year without El Nino, this look here probably would have still produced an active hurricane season, but obviously because of the fact that we have an El Nino out here, it is not likely going to play out that way. And just to show you how strong things are with the El Nino right now, taking a look at the latest sea surface temperature plots from the Nino 3.4, which is the Central Pacific here, kind of in between the Eastern and Central Pacific, and we specifically look at the Nino 3.4. If you're not familiar with why I'm talking specifically about the Nino 3.4, we typically look at this area as the exact area in the equator where we monitor El Nino conditions. And right now, the latest value of the Nino 3.4 is at 1.4 degrees Celsius above normal. And this is the daily sea surface temperature plots. So on the daily plots here, we are already well above El Nino threshold. In fact, we've pretty much crossed El Nino threshold and been in it since mid-April. And then ever since then, we have just been going up and up and up. And again, this graph here is going to continue to just rise meteorically, probably until around the fall, and then we'll see things level out and then probably see weakening beyond that. But a very strong El Nino is on the cards. In fact, we are already basically almost, if not at, strong El Nino threshold with the latest daily sea surface temperature plots. Of course, that does not necessarily mean that we are yet in a strong El Nino officially. In the MDR, though, in the Atlantic, on the other hand, especially in the Atlantic MDR, which, by the way, if you need a refresher, is generally the deep tropical Atlantic, especially out here in the eastern Atlantic, east of the islands here, the current sea surface temperature anomalies there are, again, slightly above normal, kind of close to normal right now. And we've kind of been on the ups and downs here in the Atlantic over the last several weeks. Again, definitely not a sign of, the most favorable conditions out there. We've kind of seen periods of stronger trades with a lot of Saharan dust coming off, and then weaker trades, and then we see some warming here. And it looks like right now, at least since the beginning of June, end of May, we've been in a warming trend in the Atlantic. But still, when you compare how much warmth we have in the Pacific to how much warmth we have in the Atlantic right now, the Pacific definitely overwhelms. And that is generally how El Nino has its effect on the Atlantic. And this is really well summed up by this map here by, I guess this is News 12. I'm assuming this is a station somewhere in the southeast. I want to give credit where credit is due. Typically, in an El Nino, hurricane activity-wise, we see a warm Pacific, and that's obviously what we are seeing right now. Sea surface temperature anomalies are very warm, and that's also really helping kickstart the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. We've already had 3 named storms there, and typically, again, El Nino causes more storms, less wind shear in the Pacific, and less storms and more wind shear in the Atlantic. And the reason why is that is because atmospherically, the atmospheric pattern when it comes to rising motion and sinking motion with El Nino, because of all of the warm water in the Pacific, we tend to see lots of rising motion in the atmosphere, meaning a more favorable environment for thunderstorms to grow and develop, and that typically leads to a lot of moisture, which obviously sets the stage for lots of tropical development. And the outflow from all of that convective activity tends to deposit itself in the Atlantic, and because we have very strong rising air in the Pacific, we have to have a sinking air cell as a matter of balance in the atmosphere, and that typically sets up in the Atlantic. And because of that, we see sinking air in the Atlantic, which means, once again, less storms and typically a less active hurricane season. And this year, we are definitely going to have that El Nino pattern that we see this year. In fact, more than likely, it is becoming increasingly likely as the months go by, and really as the days go by, that this year's El Nino is going to be probably one of, if not the strongest El Nino we've seen in recent history. And that is perfectly summed up by taking a look at the latest climate model forecasts, most notably from the European, which has come out a few days ago for this month. And you could see here, as we get to October and November, many of the European ensembles here are showing an El Nino potentially as strong as 3 degrees Celsius above normal. And not all of the ensembles show that. There are still a few that are below it. But one thing I will tell you is that this is the relative Nino 3.4 map. So this is not even the regular raw Nino 3.4 sea surface temperatures. On that map, all of the anomalies are even higher. But either way, if you are not really sure what I'm talking about here, just know that the current climate model data is forecasting a near record, if not record strong El Nino for this year's hurricane season. It's not just the European, though. It's the NMME model, too, and virtually every single climate model that has been coming out in the past few months. But the NMME as well, the North American Model Ensemble, I believe that's what it's called. This is just, I think it sets the stage that, whenever they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think this graph tells it all. Quite the warm anomalies here by the time we get to August, September, October. So this is the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, but probably not even the peak of strength of this El Nino here in the Pacific. And yet we are already seeing quite the warm anomalies here that are more than likely chart topping, at least according to the graph here. And this once again just kind of hammers home the point of a record strong El Nino setting up for this year. And then the Climate Prediction Center as well came out with their update on ENSO for today. They release monthly ENSO updates, and they officially say now El Nino conditions are present and are expected to strengthen into the northern hemisphere winter of 2026 and 2027. And not just all of the models showing a strong El Nino, but the Climate Prediction Center, as well as of their latest June forecast, explicitly indicates that we have over a 50% chance of reaching very strong El Nino conditions, especially with the sea surface temperature anomalies here. Once again, especially as we get to the end of the year, but already more than likely by the time we get to August, September, October here, ASO, that means August, September, October. These letters here on the bottom represent each tri-monthly period. So again, for instance, ASO, August, September, October, just giving you an idea of what this graph means if you're not familiar. Even by then, by August, September, October, we should already see a strong El Nino in place. So a very, very strong El Nino is coming this year. And that's definitely going to be a huge factor because obviously it is going to impact how the atmosphere circulation sets up. As I mentioned before, with this graph here, we tend to see lots of rising motion in the Pacific, and that as well is being reflected very strongly in the models. I believe this is the European model for the velocity potential anomalies, and this was created by Ben Knoll on Twitter, and he created this a few days ago. Props to Ben Knoll. He always creates great graphs and posts them on Twitter, so I have to give him the credit for that. And he says here, El Nino ocean atmospheric coupling will only grow stronger in the months ahead. The Atlantic hurricane season will probably be very suppressed because of it. The classic east-based El Nino rising air signature may extend slightly further west because of an extra long warmth. And basically what he means is all of the green that you see here being indicated by the model here. Again, I believe this is the European, and especially as it strengthens by the time we get to August and September. Just look at all this green here because of the El Nino representing lots of rising air setting up in the Pacific. And again, as a result, we see more sinking air in the Atlantic, I mean, this map here kind of indicates that we might have a little bit of rising air that tries to hold on in the Atlantic here, but we're even seeing this pattern set up in the models right now in the weekly range, not just on the monthly, very, very long-term scale, and that's represented here by the velocity potential anomalies by the European, going out to just the next several weeks here, and as you can see. Right now, compared to the end of the forecast here, which takes us out till the end of June and into July, in the Pacific, that's where we are kind of generally seeing things here on this graph, and you can actually see the longitude markers here. 90 west to 180 degrees, that's generally the eastern and central Pacific. Over the next few weeks, you see that very, very strong rising motion setting up. So El Nino is coming. All of the signs are there, especially when you see this signature here with the rising motion here over the next few weeks, that definitely tells you that the atmosphere is going to solidly set up like an El Nino. So all systems to go for El Nino to be very, very strong this year, and obviously will be a very major factor. And then finally, you could see the El Nino as well being represented by the 850 millibar zonal winds. Those are really going to rack up here very strongly in the Pacific, and again, it's going to be because we have lots of rising motion in the Pacific right now, and that leads to strong westerly winds across the tropical Pacific, which is what helps allow for all of the warm water in the Pacific to surface and grow and become extremely warm. And especially look at these anomalies here coming up in just the next few days here in the Pacific. We're really probably going to see a huge spike in the Nino 3.4 here coming up very soon. And this as well is also going to help fuel a very, very active hurricane season in the Pacific because, again, rising motion helps with tropical development, as in lots of thunderstorms being able to develop. And also when we have weaker trades and westerly wind anomalies as well, that also helps with seeing more cyclonic vorticity in especially the low levels of the atmosphere. So all of those things are going to come together to once again create the dynamic here of a more active Pacific and very likely a less active Atlantic. And you can see that all represented here when I show you the NMME run, especially with the precipitation anomalies here over the next several months in the Atlantic. And as I take it out into time, you see, starting off in June, I don't even have to go through the rest of the model here. Look at all of the yellow we see on the precipitation anomalies, meaning sinking air, less favorable conditions in the tropical Atlantic. And as I take this out through time here throughout the rest of the model, you could see it pretty much persists all throughout the rest of the hurricane season. Even as we get into August and September, you see lots of these oranges here and browns, or yellows, I should say, representing less precipitation than normal. Very dry conditions, especially throughout the Caribbean. And this is going to be significant because, yes, on the good news, this is definitely not an indicative sign of an active hurricane season, but we will likely see drought conditions for South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and that also has its downsides as well. And that's also going to be very heavily amplified because of El Nino here. So less active hurricane season on the way, more than likely, and all of the hurricane season predictions are indicating that right now. Pretty much ever since early April, with the exception of University of Arizona here, in which they released a forecast in early April calling for 20 named storms and 9 hurricanes. So the exact opposite of what we're going to have this season. Although, given how the Atlantic is, sometimes you can never rule out the crazy. But I would not say that this forecast is going to happen. But pretty much every single forecast since early April, 13 named storms, 12 named storms, 11 named storms, 9 named storms. I still have a hard time believing we're going to get this low in terms of activity. But in general, take a look at all the forecasts that have come out here over the last several weeks. All of them are slightly below the average here that we typically see in the Atlantic of 14 named storms and 7 hurricanes, with the most recent forecast being Colorado State University, which actually released an update to their forecast yesterday, and they too also called for a below normal season, 11 named storms, 5 hurricanes, 2 major hurricanes with an ACE score of 70, and again, all of these numbers below the long-term average of what we typically see in the Atlantic. And interestingly enough, too, this is also a decrease from their April forecast, which was also slightly below normal, but higher than what they predicted in June. And I really quickly want to show you some of the analogs here, as in, similar years compared to this year, if I can, find them. I believe this is it here. The analog years for 2026, and I really like to look at this because this kind of gives us an idea of, what the reasoning and the kind of logic behind the Colorado State University forecasts. 2015, one of the analogs here, 1965, 2009, 1997, and especially 1997 and 2015 here, those were both some of the strongest El Ninos, or pretty much the 2 strongest El Ninos in recent history this year. So that definitely kind of hints to the fact that they are considering, Colorado State University is considering the fact that we might have the strongest El Nino on record this year, and of course because of that, both of those seasons were not very active at all. Especially in 1997, we only had 40 ACE points in the Atlantic. Not sure we're going to get that low, but still, that still led to a total final, outcome here of their forecast going with 70 ACE, which again is still below normal. And I'd say that that is pretty accurately representative of my forecast as well, which I released for the Atlantic 2 on June 1st, so at the start of this month. And if you saw this before, I think you'll kind of think that this is a good prediction, hopefully. But for those that have not seen my prediction before, well, here it is. This is what I forecasted at the beginning of June. 12 named storms, 5 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes, and my ACE forecast is around 80 to 85 points. And I will say that is definitely probably on the higher end compared to what most people are predicting right now. And we will see what exactly happens this hurricane season. Certainly looking like it's going to be probably one of the least active hurricane seasons we've seen of the last 10 years. Not sure yet that this is going to be one of the least active hurricane seasons of the last few decades, but definitely, more than likely going to be a less active season. But don't let yourself be caught off guard, because no matter what, even if we don't have lots of activity this year, we are still going to more than likely have at least 1 or 2 strong storms that develop and probably will impact somebody. And I want to show you here, with these next few slides here, examples of strong storms that happened during El Nino years. Just because we have an El Nino and we'll have less activity does not mean that we will have zero activity. I want to start off by showing you one prime example of a storm that happened very recently. Hurricane Michael happened in 2018. And 2018 as well was actually a quite interesting season because it happened during an El Nino. Actually, I could honestly go more in depth with this if I'll be quite honest with you, but conditions were actually not seemingly very favorable on paper for the 2018 hurricane season at all. Yet somehow it still ended up being slightly more active than everybody thought it would. And as a result, we got Hurricane Michael, which impacted the Florida Panhandle, Mexico Beach, Florida, as a Category 5 hurricane, became a Category 5 hurricane landfall for the United States. And then 2015, one of the analog years by Colorado State University this year. And of course, 2015, the last really, really strong El Nino that we had Hurricane Joaquin, which was a surprise hurricane that happened, lashed the Bahamas for days as a Category 4 hurricane, and even as a major hurricane overall. And if you remember tracking Joaquin, there was actually for a while a threat for the East Coast associated with Joaquin. Luckily, that did not happen. But still, it was a very interesting storm nonetheless. And then Hurricane Andrew, another very, very infamous storm, and especially infamous for South Florida, and made landfall as a Category 5 hurricane as well. That impacted Florida and Louisiana, and it happened in 1992, the same year as yet another very strong El Nino. There's a little bit of a debate on whether or not Andrew actually happened while El Nino was present, because it kind of happened later in the year after the El Nino peaked in 1992, but El Nino conditions were definitely still present during the 1992 hurricane season, because it was not a very active hurricane season at all, yet we still had Andrew. And then finally, going all the way back, 1965, I believe also another analog year as well here, according to Colorado State University, and this is Hurricane Betsy, a very impactful storm for especially New Orleans. This was kind of the benchmark storm for New Orleans before Katrina. So you get the pattern here. Some of these El Nino years still produce infamous storms that bring lots of impact and lots of threat to life and lots of destruction. So bottom line, what I'm saying is, do not let your guard down this hurricane season. Prepare for this hurricane season like you would any other hurricane season. No matter what, you should always prepare and always keep an eye out onto the tropics. And speaking of what's happening in the tropics right now in the Atlantic, nothing much happening overall, but there is an area in the Bay of Campeche here a low percent chance of development here in the Bay of Campeche. Some of the models are trying to show some sort of development happening here in the Western Gulf, more than likely going to be a weak spin-up storm that very quickly gets its act together and probably is a, low-end tropical storm at most, although some other models show absolutely nothing happening. So, not a lot of certainty and not a very high likelihood that this will develop, but it is an area of interest nonetheless. And of course, it is hurricane season, so we will be watching this area closely here. Here's a satellite picture of it, and you can see right now it's over the Yucatan, producing some convection. And there is a little bit of a, cyclonic circulation here if you look closely on the satellite, but it is very broad. There is also some wind shear as well, so conditions are not the most favorable, but of course we will see how exactly it develops here, especially as it moves offshore and into the waters of the Bay of Campeche. And the Bay of Campeche sometimes is notorious for getting these weird, very quick, surprising spin-ups. So we'll see exactly what happens here over the next few days, but regardless, we will see a lot of rainfall. We're definitely seeing that right now quite a bit over Mexico, and we're probably going to see a lot of rainfall as well as we head to the end of the week for portions of northern Mexico and Texas. And then finally, taking a look at the model here, let's actually really quickly refresh this to see if the 12Z is out. Yes, the 12Z Euro is out. Great. I really hope that the 12Z Euro would come out, and I guess it did as I was recording. So let's take a look and see what it shows. And you can see here, some development tries to happen. The biggest issue that is preventing development here is that we are going to see a very strong flow to the, northwest here, kind of moving this very quickly inland into the Bay of Campeche and into Mexico. So this is not going to have so much time over water, but it should emerge by tomorrow. And then more than likely be on land by the time we get to late Saturday and into Sunday. But there is some sort of circulation and some sort of development that tries to occur here according to the European. But regardless, this is going to bring a lot of moisture to the southern Gulf and into Mexico. And probably some of that moisture is going to be strung out into Texas and across the southeast as well. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And then as we head into the next 7 days here, beyond that, nothing much else happening in the tropics. So it is a wait and see game to see how this hurricane season will play out. More than likely, he's going to be less active. But again, do not let your guard down this season, even if it's going to be less active, because eventually something will come along and probably cause a disturbance. So you'll want to be ready when that happens. And certainly we will still be keeping our eyes to the tropics here throughout the entire hurricane season on this channel, as we've been doing so far, daily updates on the tropics, and of course we will continue to do those daily updates throughout the entire hurricane season until everything is all said and done. But of course, we will see what exactly happens. With that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today, and if you like these kinds of videos and you like tropical updates in general, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, as again, I'll be doing these videos on a daily basis. But with that being said, make sure to go out and make the rest of your day, hopefully, a great day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'll be back with more tomorrow.